How do you leave someone you never officially had? How do you grieve a thing that never had a name? How do you stand in the middle of your own life and explain to yourself why a man you met through a knocked door at 1:47 in the morning has become the axis everything else turns on? Oreana had been asking herself these questions for 11 days. 11 days since the morning after. 11 days since he had sat on her bathroom floor and then stood in her doorway and said her name and told her to get a better lock. 11 days since she had last heard his footsteps in the hallway at midnight. The penthouse at the end of the hall was quiet now. The light under the door still came on. She knew because she checked. Not every night, most nights. She stood at the end of her own hallway and looked at the strip of amber light bleeding under his door and told herself she was just getting water. She was not just getting water. She had not knocked. Something had shifted, not between them, inside her. The baby had dropped. Her body was preparing in the way bodies prepare without asking, rearranging itself, settling, moving toward the moment that was coming, whether she was ready or not. She was 7.5 months along now. Her back ached in the morning. The apartment felt smaller than it ever had, and the wooden stool 3 floors above her, the one placed at exactly the right height beside a cold marble island by a man who had never said the word care out loud in her presence, felt very far away. Then on the 11th night, without deciding to, she put on her shoes. She walked to the elevator. She pressed the button for the top floor. The doors opened to the penthouse corridor. The light was on. She walked to the end of the hall. She raised her hand. She knocked. The door opened. Not immediately. There was a pause, long enough that she wondered if he would open it at all, long enough that her pride started assembling its argument for turning around. Then the handle moved, and he was there. But something was different. He looked at her like a man looks at something he had been trying to decide whether to want, like the decision had just been made, like her being here on the other side of this door after 11 days of silence had answered something he had been sitting with in the dark. He stepped aside. She walked in. The kitchen was warm. The stool was still there. What does 11 days of silence do to 2 people who never spoke much to begin with? What does absence do when it moves into the space where a ritual used to live? It does not disappear quietly. It leaves marks. She saw them when she looked at him in the kitchen that night. Something behind his eyes that had been working, the kind of working you do not choose, the involuntary processing of something that has gotten under your defenses before you noticed it arriving. He moved around the kitchen the same way, the same efficiency, the same lack of wasted motion, but there was a quality to the silence that night that had not been there before, a density to it, like it was holding something in. She sat on the stool and watched him and said nothing for a long time. He set a bowl in front of her. She looked at it. She asked him if he had thought about her. The question surprised her as it came out. She had not planned to ask it. He stopped moving, stood with his back to her for exactly 3 seconds. Then he said, "Yes." Just that. Yes. 1 syllable. But the weight of it filled the kitchen like the smell of the food had, like the warmth of the stove had, like the rain against the windows that had started again somewhere in the night. She picked up the spoon. She ate. He stood on the other side of the island and watched her eat, and both of them understood, without agreement, without announcement, that something had been crossed. Something that had been on the edge for months had moved, not dramatically, not with declaration, just the quiet crossing of a line that neither of them had drawn,
but both of them could see now, clearly, on the other side of 11 days.
She had a name. Oreana had been hearing it in fragments for weeks. Syllables that appeared in hushed Korean conversations that stopped when she entered the kitchen. A name that made the men near Minsoo straighten slightly, involuntarily, the way a name carries weight when it belongs to someone whose position in the world is settled and known. Her name was So-yeon, and she arrived on a Tuesday morning, not at midnight, not in the low amber light of the penthouse at 2 a.m., but in broad daylight in the building lobby. She was waiting, not for Minsoo, for Oreana. She stood near the mailboxes in a coat that cost more than 3 months of Oreana's rent. She was still, the kind of still that is practiced, the kind that belongs to women who have learned that movement costs something, and stillness is power. She looked at Oreana and did not look away. Oreana did not look away either. They stood like that for a moment, 2 women, everything else suspended. So-yeon spoke first. Her English was precise and without accent, and measured in the way that said she had thought about every word before arriving here. She said she was not his enemy. She said she had never been his enemy. She said she had known Minsoo for 13 years. She let that number sit between them. 13 years. Oreana said nothing. So-yeon looked at her stomach, then at her face. Something moved across So-yeon's expression. Not cruelty, not calculation, something Oreana had not expected at all. Something that looked almost like grief. She said, "He has not been this way before." She said, "I want you to understand what I mean when I tell you that." She said, "In 13 years, I have not seen him be this way." And then she said the thing that Oreana would carry with her for the rest of that day, up the elevator, back to 4B, down onto the couch with her hands on her stomach and the afternoon light moving across the ceiling. She said, "You should know what you are carrying before you decide how heavy it is." Then she left, and Oreana sat in her apartment and stared at the ceiling and turned that sentence over and over in her hands like a stone she had found somewhere unexpected. What are you carrying, Oreana? What does it weigh? How long have you been carrying it without knowing?
There was a night, mid-November, when the city went very still. The first cold had settled in. The kind of cold that changes the way sound moves, makes everything sharper, makes the night feel both closer and further away. She came upstairs later than usual, close to 3 a.m. He was not in the kitchen. She almost turned around. Then she heard his voice, low, coming from the far room. He was on a call. She waited near the kitchen island, one hand on the cool marble, and let the sounds of the apartment arrange themselves around her. The low murmur of his voice, the hiss of something left warm on the stove for her, the particular quality of the dark in a room lit only from the city below. She looked around the kitchen. She had been in this room dozens of times. She knew the placement of the ceramic dishes. She knew which drawer held the wooden spoons. She knew the way the second burner on the right ran hot, and he always compensated. She knew this kitchen the way you know a place you have spent quiet hours in, the way you know a place that has fed you. The call ended. He walked back into the kitchen. He stopped when he saw her, not with surprise, with something else, something she was starting to be able to read. The way his shoulders moved down half a degree when he saw that she was there. the way the room itself seemed to settle, like she was the variable that brought it to equilibrium. He said nothing. He moved to the stove and checked what was there and added something. She climbed onto the stool. At some point in the quiet, without planning to, she said his name, not asking for anything, not starting a sentence, just his name, the same way he had said hers, filing it somewhere. He looked up from the stove, looked at her, said nothing for a moment, then turned back, but the line of his shoulders had changed. Something in his posture had shifted by a degree so small only someone who had been paying very close attention would notice. She had been paying very close attention. There was a night, mid-November, when the city went very still. The first cold had settled in. The kind of cold that changes the way sound moves, makes everything sharper, makes the night feel both closer and further away. She came upstairs later than usual, close to 3 a.m. He was not in the kitchen. She almost turned around. Then she heard his voice, low, coming from the far room. He was on a call. She waited near the kitchen island, one hand on the cool marble, and let the sounds of the apartment arrange themselves around her. The low murmur of his voice, the hiss of something left warm on the stove for her, the particular quality of the dark in a room lit only from the city below. She looked around the kitchen. She had been in this room dozens of times. She knew the placement of the ceramic dishes. She knew which drawer held the wooden spoons. She knew the way the second burner on the right ran hot, and he always compensated. She knew this kitchen the way you know a place you have spent quiet hours in, the way you know a place that has fed you. The call ended. He walked back into the kitchen. He stopped when he saw her, not with surprise, with something else, something she was starting to be able to read. The way his shoulders moved down half a degree when he saw that she was there. The way the room itself seemed to settle, like she was the variable that brought it to equilibrium. He said nothing. He moved to the stove and checked what was there and added something. She climbed onto the stool. At some point in the quiet, without planning to, she said his name, not asking for anything, not starting a sentence, just his name, the same way he had said hers, filing it somewhere. He looked up from the stove, looked at her, said nothing for a moment, then turned back, but the line of his shoulders had changed. Something in his posture had shifted by a degree so small only someone who had been paying very close attention would notice. She had been paying very close attention.
There was an afternoon, not a midnight, an afternoon, when she saw him from a window. She had not meant to. She was not watching for him. She was standing at her kitchen sink, filling a glass of water, and she looked down at the street, and he was there, on the pavement below, standing with two men near a dark car. She had seen him in the hallway, in the kitchen, on her bathroom floor. She had never seen him outside. He was different in the daylight. Not different in the way she had expected, not softer, not smaller, not more ordinary. Different in the way that the world around him moved differently. People on the pavement rerouted without being asked, not because they were afraid, or not only because they were afraid, but because there was something in the way he occupied space that made a 2-meter radius around him feel decided. She stood at her window with her glass of water and she watched him. He was talking. His face was doing the thing it always did, contained, precise, unhurried. One of the men nodded and moved away. The second one waited. Minsoo looked up, not at her window specifically, just up at the building, the way a person looks at a place they had been thinking about. She stepped back from the glass, not hiding, just stepping back. She thought about what Soyeon had said. You should know what you are carrying before you decide how heavy it is. She put her hand on her stomach. The baby was quiet. The afternoon light came in through the window and lay across the kitchen floor in a wide, pale rectangle. She thought, I know what I am carrying. She thought, it is not heavy. That surprised her. After everything, the wrong room, the men who moved before he asked them to, the woman in the lobby, the world she could see the shape of without ever being allowed inside it, it was not heavy. It was something else, something she did not have a word for yet. She would find the word later. She would find it at 3 a.m. on a kitchen floor with his hand pressed to her stomach and his voice low and his shoulders finally down. It was the kind of night that arrives without announcing itself. Nothing extraordinary in the beginning. She came upstairs. He was there. The kitchen was warm. The city was quiet below. She ate. He stood. And then, without a pivot, without a dramatic setup, without the kind of lead-in that stories usually use for important conversations, they had the conversation. She said, I am not going to pretend I know what your life is. He said nothing. She said, I am also not going to pretend I have not been here. She said, in this kitchen, in this life, in your hallway at 3 a.m. She said, I need you to tell me one thing that is true, just one. She was not asking for promises. She was not asking for declarations. She was asking for one thing, solid and real, that she could stand on. He looked at the counter for a long moment. He looked at the succulent. He looked at his hands. He said, you are the only person I have made room for in 7 years. He said it quietly, without drama, like the way he said everything, like a fact that has been true for a long time and is simply, finally, being named. She sat with that. 7 years. She did not ask what had happened 7 years ago. She understood, in the way she had learned to understand his silences, that there was a door there she was not meant to open, not tonight, maybe not ever. But the thing he had just given her, the simple, factual weight of 7 years, was enough. It was more than enough. It was a whole house built from a single sentence. Labor did not announce itself the way she expected. She had expected drama. She had expected to know. Instead, it arrived quietly in the small hours, like so many things in her life had arrived recently. A tightening, a low, deep ache that was different from all the others, her body finally moving past rehearsal. She sat up in bed at 2:41 in the morning. She was very still. She timed it. It was real. She called her midwife. She called her sister, who lived 40 minutes away, and answered on the second ring with a voice that was already awake, already moving. She sat on the edge of her bed in 4B, and she breathed. And then she did something she had not planned to do. She thought about the amber light at the end of the hall. She thought about a man who kept a stool at exactly the right height and never once in all the months locked the door. She stood up. She walked to her front door. She opened it. She did not go upstairs. She stood in the doorway of 4B, and she looked at the strip of light at the far end of the hall, and she breathed, in, out. And then she heard the door at the end of the hall open. She had not knocked. She had not made a sound. He was just there, standing in the frame of his door, looking at her. The distance between them was the full length of the corridor. It felt like no distance at all. He said, "Is it time?" She said, "Yes." He walked toward her. No jacket, no pause, no hesitation, just the straight, deliberate movement of a man who has already decided. The hours that followed were not cinematic. They were not soft-lit and musical. They were real hours, long and slow and demanding and full of the ordinary difficulty of a body doing the hardest work it knows. He sat in the chair beside her through all of them. Her sister was there too, on the other side, holding her hand through the parts that required holding. He did not hold her hand. He was just present, the way he had always been present, occupying space differently than anyone else in the room. Steady in a way she had come to know and rely on without noticing she had come to rely on it. He spoke very little. When he did speak, it was the same voice from the bathroom floor, low, measured, the cadence of it doing the work. At 6:14 in the morning, while the city outside was beginning its ordinary day without any knowledge of what was happening in this room, the baby arrived. Small, perfect, demanding, alive in the way that newborns are alive, completely and suddenly and without apology. Oreana held her daughter. The room was very loud for a moment, and then very quiet. In the quiet, she looked up. He was standing at the window, looking out at the city, his back to the room, his hands at his sides. She could see the particular quality of his stillness that she had learned to read the way you learn to read weather. This was not the stillness of a man who had closed himself off. This was the stillness of a man who was holding something new, something he did not yet have a name for. She said his name. He turned. She looked at him. She looked at her daughter. She looked back at him. She said, "Come here." He crossed the room. He stood beside the bed. He looked at the baby. The baby looked at nothing in particular, the way newborns look, unfocused, ancient, entirely present. His face did the thing she had been watching for months, the thing she had first seen on the night the baby kicked against his palm, the opening, the undoing of all the careful architecture. Just for a moment, just for the length of a breath. Then it settled back, but different now, like a door that has been opened and closed, but will never lock the same way again.
2 days later, she was home. 4B. Smaller than she remembered. Quieter. The baby slept. She stood in her kitchen in the early morning in a silence that was different from all the silences that had come before it. Heavier, fuller. She looked at the windowsill. Her succulent was still there, small, green, unhurried. She thought about the one upstairs. She thought about the kitchen that had fed her for months, the stool, the ginger tea, the man who spoke in actions because words cost him something. She heard a knock, not frantic, not loud. One knock, considered, the way she imagined he did everything. She opened the door. He was standing there with a bag, a small handled bag from the grocery down a street. She looked at it. She looked at him. He said, "Ginger tea," and other things. She stepped aside. He came in. He went to her kitchen, her small, ordinary kitchen, not the marble and restaurant-grade kitchen 3 floors up, and he moved through it the way he moved through all spaces, like he had walked it 10,000 times, like it was already a place he knew. She sat down at her own kitchen table. She watched him. The baby made a sound from the bedroom. He stopped, went still, listened. The sound settled.
The baby was not asking for anything, just making the sounds that new living things make to confirm they are real. He started moving again. She put her chin in her hand and watched him in her kitchen at 8 a.m. and thought about the long distance between 1:47 a.m. and this moment. How many nights, how many silences, how many times she had walked down a hallway in bare feet, telling herself this would be the last time. The tea was ready. He brought it to the table, set it in front of her, said nothing. She looked at the cup. She looked at him. He was standing beside her table in her small apartment that was nothing like his and everything like hers. And he did not look like a man waiting to leave. He looked like a man who had arrived somewhere. She wrapped both hands around the cup. She said, "The lock on the door is the same one." He said, "I know." She said, "You should probably fix that." He sat down across from her. He said, "Yes." The morning light came through the window. The baby was quiet. The succulent on the windowsill caught the light. 2 cups of tea on a small kitchen table. A man who had spent 7 years making no room. A woman who had knocked on the wrong door and found something she had not known she was looking for. A daughter asleep in the next room who would grow up not knowing for a long time the particular shape of the story that had built the quiet around her. They did not speak for a long time after that. They did not need to. The silence between them had never been empty. From the very first night, from the very first knock, from the very first bowl of soup set down without ceremony on a cold marble island at 2 a.m. in the rain, the silence had been full. This one was the fullest yet. This one held something that had no name in any of the languages either of them spoke. Something that had been building in a penthouse kitchen and a bathroom floor and a corridor with only one lit door. Something that had arrived the way the most important things arrive. Not announced, not dramatic, just present. Like a knock at the wrong door. Like an unlocked door at 1:47 in the morning. Like a stool placed at exactly the right height by someone who would never say out loud what it meant. Like a light left on. Always, from the very beginning. Left on.
Was it the wrong door? She used to think about this. The question she had turned over in those first weeks. The locked doors all down the hall. The one that was not locked. The one that was lit. She stopped asking the question somewhere around the 3rd month. She stopped asking because the question assumed there was a right door. It assumed there was a version of that night where she knocked somewhere else and found something safer, something simpler, something that did not come with 3 men who disappeared when a hand was raised, something that did not come with wrong rooms and names spoken in the lobby by women with grief behind their eyes, something that did not require her to learn a new language made entirely of actions and silences and small wooden stools. Maybe that version of the night existed somewhere. Maybe some other Oreana walked down some other hallway and knocked on some lit door belonging to some ordinary neighbor with crackers in the cupboard. But this Oreana had walked to the end of this hallway, and the door at the end had opened, and the man in the frame had been exactly who he was, all of it, every part, the silver ring and the cold eyes and the 3 men and the kitchen that smelled like a memory she had never had. And somehow, in ways she was still learning the shape of, that had been exactly right. She was not going to explain it. She did not think it needed explaining. Some things arrive the way they arrive.
Some doors open the way they open. Some silences are not empty. Some lights are left on, and some wrong doors turn out to be the only right door there ever was.